Norfolk Select Board. As a preliminary matter, this is Kevin Kalka, the chair of the Norfolk Select Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Anita Mecklenburg?
I'm here.
Cece Van Tine?
I am also here.
Thank you very much. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Blythe Robinson?
Here.
Judith Lazardi?
Here.
Hillary Cohen?
I'm here.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, good evening. This open meeting of the Norfolk Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. And as always, we are recording and streaming tonight, so please avoid sharing your screen as there is no way to undo that. Thank you very much. Blythe, with that, would you mind taking us through our agenda this evening?
Of course. Tonight we have some COVID-19 updates, opportunity for public comment. The action items include voting the board's intention to lay out Silver Fox Road for acceptance at the November 17th Fall Town Meeting, to consider approving and issuing a written decision in order that a dog owned by Melissa Mitchell is a dangerous dog, to consider approval of additional dates for Zealous Beer Company for pop-up beer and food events on Town Hill on Sundays through November 1st, to consider approval of the transfer of the common victualler license for Roma, Italiano pizza and roast beef, to consider approval of various select board policies and procedures, and to make appointments to various boards and committees. And we have 5 discussion items. They include reviewing a draft of the fall town meeting warrant, discussing the proposed 5-year capital improvement program, hosting a local restaurant roundtable discussion to review operational limitations heading into the fall and winter and ways for the town to partner with these businesses to support them. Please discuss website posting of board correspondence and town administrator updates. After that, we have 6 warrants for the board's approval and 2 sets of minutes for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blythe. With that, please take us through some COVID-19 updates.
Of course. So this week our case count has gone up by 3. We're currently at 46 cases with 2 that are active. 2 late last week and 1 on Monday. We have posted some safety tips on our website about Halloween. I'm sure you can appreciate that Halloween is a fun event. It's a family event. It's for kids, and it's generally outdoors, trick-or-treating. So it's not in the town's purview to decide that it's going to cancel Halloween, but it's certainly, we want to make sure everyone is aware of ways to celebrate Halloween safely and options for that. So those are posted. The Board of Health does meet next week. They may have some other guidance to provide, but right now we're recommending people follow the CDC guidance and take a quick look at that poster if they have a chance. I often get asked, well, where do we stand with money from other agencies to support our costs for COVID? And so I just want to give you an update about that. In FY20, we spent approximately $193,000 on things related to the pandemic, and the state share of that was just over 90, the federal share, the balance of about 102. Thus far in FY21, we've spent a further $340,000. And in this case, the federal share is just under 70, and the state share is 270. We clearly haven't gotten through the pandemic, so there will likely be other expenses, but that's where we are today. And as you may recall, we had approval for just over $1 million, so we have not come close to that yet. But I know that the schools are still have expenses going on. They're still trying to hire some temporary custodians to help with cleaning and disinfecting. And there are other costs that are being incurred. So that's just a snapshot today. Good news front, due almost exclusively to the efforts of Ann Proto, our rec director. Remote learning is up and running. She's running a program at the Grange and one other location. And as I understand it, she's been able to provide that service for the people who wanted to sign up when we were able to get going. So good news there. And then perhaps everyone has seen the step two of phase 3 reopening guidance from the state. I'll just touch on it briefly as it refers to us. And it includes if there are any indoor or outdoor recreation businesses, and we do have that, they can increase capacity to 50% and offer a few more things than they might have done before. Libraries can increase their capacity to 50%. And however, in other areas, indoor gatherings are still limited to 25 people, outdoor gatherings still at 50 people, and events at venues and in public settings, such as Town Hill, limited to 100 people to lower risk. So we are clearly have been in a good zone so far, in the white zone. We really hope to stay there, but that's just where things are right now. And those are my updates.
Thank you very much, Blythe, and thank you for emphasizing the town and the board's position on deciding if holidays move forward. You know, we wear a lot of hats on the select board and in town management, and one of them that we're glad we do not wear is playing the Grinch of various holidays. So thank you for clarifying that, because I had received a couple of questions.
Yeah, just one more thing. It's our poster is on the homepage of the website if people want to look at it. It's just guidance. I'm sure every family can make good choices for themselves and find fun and safe ways to celebrate. That's really what we're just trying to emphasize.
Thank you, Blythe. I'll toss it around to the rest of the board for any comments or questions related to Blythe's COVID-19 updates, starting with not Anita. There's a head shake. No. Cece? Nope, neither there. Thank you very much, Blythe. With that, we'll move into our public comment component of our meeting. At this point, anybody who is in attendance on the call today has the ability to share with us a comment or concern within the board or the town administrator's purview. You have about 3 minutes to do so, and if you would like to do that this evening, we ask that you please use the raise hand function located by clicking the participants icon on the bottom of your window. We'll give it a second for those who would like to raise their hand. We are not seeing any hands at this time. If you are having trouble finding the raise hand button, please feel free to wave furiously in front of your camera and let us know that you'd like to be unmuted. We are seeing no hands or furious waving at this time, so we'll be moving on to our next agenda item. Our next item this evening is to please vote on the board's intention to lay out Silver Fox Road for acceptance at the November 17th Fall Town Meeting. Blythe, would you give us some background, please?
Sure. So you may recall that this matter was taken up at last fall's town meeting with a couple of other streets, but for a technicality, if you will, that got cleared up later, Silver Fox Road was not able to move forward. It was thought that there was a title issue related to a conveyance of a property. And as you also may recall, the town meeting process requires that we complete the deed and acceptance within 120 days of the town meeting vote. And because of this issue that arose about a conveyance of a house on the street, we weren't able to accomplish that within the 120 days. So for lack of a more technical term, we really having a do-over here, which is to go through the same process we went through last fall, which is the board votes its intent to lay it out, refers it to the planning board for a report. While they have 45 days to do that, they have no intention of taking that time. They're going to act on this next week at their meeting, thereby punting it back to the select board for a meeting, public meeting, to get any input that anyone has on that. And the notices have gone out to the abutters again this year. And so once that all wraps up, then town meeting can then take an action in November to vote to accept the road. And we then have a second shot at 120 days to finalize this. So that's what's up with this. And that's what our next steps are.
Thanks, Blythe. You answered my only question regarding the planning board's perception of where we are with this process. So thank you for throwing that in there. I'll toss it to the rest of the board for any questions or comments. I'm seeing one head shakes, see two head shakes. So at that point, I'll move down my PDF to find what the motion is what I'll do.
It's a 2-paragraph motion.
Super.
Hey, it's not a bond issue. Come on.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx myself. Okay. I move that the board vote on its own initiative and based upon the recommendation of Public Works Director Blair Crane and Town Planner Richard J. McCarthy, it intends to lay out a town way at Silver Fox Road, Sandy Knoll Estates 2. It is in the opinion of the Select Board that common convenience and necessity require the laying out of town way at this location. In order to comply with the provisions of Chapter 82 of the Massachusetts General Laws and to provide for a full and proper public discourse on this matter, the Select Board has also voted that notice of this intention be served upon the owners of the lands that will be acquired for this purpose and on abutters thereto. This notice shall state the intentions of the Select Board and announce that the Select Board will meet on October 20th, 2020 in accordance with the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20, relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency. This public meeting may be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Alternative public access to this meeting would be done via Zoom online video conferencing to hear all persons interested in the laying out of these town ways. Please check posted meeting agenda for the meeting location details. Further, in accordance with Chapter 82 of the Massachusetts General Laws, to forward Silver Fox Road, Sandy Knoll Estates 2, to the Norfolk Planning Board for a recommendation on street acceptance. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion?
One minor point, if I may. I admit to a somewhat a copy paste job. There's only one town way to lay out right now. Last year, this was for 5 different roads. So I would just ask a friendly amendment that say the laying out of this town way rather than multiple townways.
Friendly amendment accepted. Any other additional discussion? Hearing none, so we will do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
It is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Our next item this evening is to please consider approving and issuing a written decision and order that a dog owned by Melissa Mitchell is a dangerous dog. Blythe, would you mind giving us a little bit of background?
Yes, so after the board wrapped up the public hearing on September 15th and deliberated, they reached the conclusion that unanimously that the dog be deemed dangerous. And so the next step in the process is to issue a written decision and order. And that has been drafted and it's in your packet to review. Joining me on the call tonight is Town Council Peter Mello, who's had is deep into this as I have to draft it and make sure it's appropriate for the board to review, discuss, and vote on tonight. So I'll leave it there in case Peter has any other details that he thinks are relevant.
Nothing to add at the moment, Blythe. If the board has any questions, I'm happy to address any.
So I think a good place to start will be to highlight some of the changes that have been made in terms of edits in the last couple of days. They're minor in nature, but I did want to go through them just so that everybody was working off of the last draft. And Peter, I imagine the one that I have from this afternoon is the last draft. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I would
So
just
I'll
say,
just
given
go ahead,
how we weren't able to finish this draft until today, and so if that's why we weren't able to share it all the way around and get everyone a chance to really look through it. It's been quite busy.
completely understood. So starting with our first edit, we are going to go to page 2. We are going to shoot down to Exhibit 15. The edited version now reads for Exhibit 15, documents submitted by Attorney Jeremy Cohen during hearing session on September 15th, 2020, referencing minor child's recollection of the events on June 13th, 2020. In making that change to Exhibit 15, we have now added Exhibit 16, which then reads copies of video footage of the hearing sessions of July 27, 2020 and September 15, 2020. And Peter, you can speak to why the change was made, but it was just to include something that was submitted during the course of the testimonies, correct?
That's right. Yeah, there was an email from Attorney Cohen during the hearing session on the 15th, and the change was just intended to capture that, the fact that one additional item had been submitted during the course of that hearing session.
Thank you very much. Our next edit will be on page 3, underneath finding of facts. Number 5, it read, the owner's mother, Miss Rampino, provided first aid to the minor child, and after a period of 45 minutes, took the child home to the parents who live at 94 Boardman Street. An edit was made to add in the words, Miss Mitchell took the child home to the parents who live at 94 Boardman Street, to clarify the difference between her mother and her. Is that accurate, Peter?
That's right.
Thank you very much. Our next edit is if we go down to page 6, third paragraph, starting with in addition, we clarified that and further advised, here I'll do the whole sentence. In addition, Ms. Bolin opined explicitly that Annabelle is a potential danger to humans, particularly children. See Exhibit 5, page 1, and further advised that the underlying bite appears to be a level 4 bite according to the Dunbar bite scale. This was more a change that was meant to more accurately reflect the sentiments that she shared during the course of the meeting, as opposed to speculating as to what she intended.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, it was just essentially a clerical change to just quote directly from the submission that she had made to the board.
Thank you, Peter. If we go to the next page, page 7, the first paragraph that starts with in view of the fact, a sentence was added to the end that reads, moreover, as Ms. Bolin described, even assuming for purposes of argument that Annabelle was concerned about the child wearing a mask and hat, the dog could have barked or run toward the boy rather than bite him. And Peter, if you could just clarify the intent there.
Yeah, so this was a change that just captured the fact that Ms. Bolin had testified with respect to the issue of the fact that the child in question had a mask and hat on. There was some testimony about the extent to which, what the dog's perception of that was. And Ms. Bolin had remarked that the dog had other alternatives available in that moment, short of a bite. And she was sort of articulating that, I think to demonstrate that it was a grossly disproportionate reaction. Her testimony was that, the dog didn't need to bite the child. If it did indeed, even assuming for purposes of argument that it was concerned about the child's appearance, it could have, demonstrated that in alternative ways, including barking or sort of running at the child rather than undertaking to bite the child.
Thanks, Peter. And the last change that we have is on the final page that has signature lines on it under order number 4. At the end of that order, we identified comma as the animal control officer may require. Peter, you just want to touch on the reason for that entry?
Just, subject to the board's discretion, obviously, just to clarify that among those means of identifying the dog, ultimately, so provided the board feels it appropriate, the animal control officer could choose among those options. So, for example, whether the owner would be required to provide photographs or videos or veterinary examination information or tattooing or microchip implantations or a combination thereof would be in a given situation up to the discretion of the animal control officer.
Thanks, Peter. And that does it for the.
And actually, I'm sorry, Kevin. There were a couple of other proposed edits that I had included in the document that I didn't hear you mention. I just want to go back to those if I could.
Sure.
And I may have missed it, but on page 6, the sentence that we added, moreover, as Ms. Boland described, there was in adding that, we also struck the final sentence of that paragraph, which had formerly read, moreover, the effect of Ms. Mitchell's distinction in this regard also is limited to the extent that the child residing at the property also wore a mask. I'm not sure that the record included any evidence to support the proposition that the child who resided at the property actually wore a mask at the moment in question. So that sentence, what had been the final sentence of that paragraph, is stricken.
Thank you for clarifying, Peter.
And then the other one was just on the immediately preceding page 6. The word retreating was inserted between the and child. So the line that read or the sentence that read, furthermore, even if at the time of the salient events, Annabelle might reasonably be construed to have been reacting to the child in question and chasing and biting the child, Annabelle did indeed, and it goes on from there. We just inserted the word retreating between the and child so that the sentence now reads, furthermore, even if at the time of the salient events, Annabelle might reasonably be construed to have been reacting to the child in question. In chasing and biting the retreating child, Annabelle did indeed react in a grossly disproportionate manner.
Thank you, Peter.
And then the final one, again, another minor change, was in the paragraph that you would same page that you would discuss, Kevin, that starts, in addition, Ms. Boland opined explicitly. About midway down, there's a sentence that reads, at the hearing, Ms. Boland further reiterated and reinforced her opinion that Annabelle is dangerous and likely would have inflicted an even deeper bite if not tethered. The phrase or could was inserted after would. So now that sentence reads, at the hearing, Ms. Boland further reiterated and reinforced her opinion that Annabelle is dangerous and likely would or could have inflicted an even deeper bite if not tethered, and recommended several measures be taken to avoid further incidents. And the addition of the phrase or could was just intended to precisely reflect the testimony from Ms. Boland.
Thank you very much, Peter. That, I think, captures all 7 of the changes that were made, unless you have anything else on your end.
No, that's it.
Thank you very much. So at this time, I will open it up to the board for any questions, comments, or concerns related to the decision as it's written, the changes that were made, or anything related to our current agenda items, starting with Cece.
No questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Anita?
I think the only question that I had was at some point, and it's a little bit blurry in terms of time, but it was indicated that Melissa Mitchell was potentially moving out of town. And I just wondered what structures or or systems were in place so that the decision about Annabelle stays with Annabelle no matter which town she lives in.
Peter,
Right.
would you like to field that? Go right ahead.
So sure. So under the statute, actually, there's a provision section 157A of chapter 140 that essentially provides that, and actually it's also in section 157 itself. And I can go to the if you give me a moment, the text in question in 157, it basically clarifies that that dangerousness determinations are effective throughout the Commonwealth and enforceable throughout the Commonwealth.
That's enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. Blythe, anything that you'd like to add?
Nope. I did discuss with Peter what the next steps are. I think what we discussed today was that so the board will finish its deliberation, will vote on this, and assuming the vote is to approve this and issue it, then we will formally provide it to Ms. Mitchell when it's signed. So we will need signatures from everybody at some point. Get it out to her. Also provide it to the animal control officer because as you can see, steps that need to be taken, there is some follow-up that's required to ensure the fence is there and to obtain the information that clarifies that Annabelle is Annabelle and the insurance certificate that shows evidence of coverage. That's just what happens next.
Thanks, Blythe. And Peter, before we move forward, is there anything that we have to include as part of our motion, or is it fairly standard approval in nature?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. And Blythe, I believe, included in the distribution some draft language for the vote. I guess the only addition I would make is just to clarify that you're voting to approve the decision, approve and issue the decision as amended in the course of this discussion.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'll open it up for any comments from our attendees. If you would like to raise your hand.
And actually, Kevin, I'm sorry, with respect to that, just to clarify that this is technically still within the deliberations, and so we're not within the public hearing anymore. This is part of the board's deliberations. So. Yeah.
Oh, very well. So opening it up to public comment isn't a requirement, but would it be?
I'm not. I think just to keep it clean procedurally, the standard approach to public hearings is that once the hearing is, just to protect everyone's interest, once the hearing is closed and the board commences its deliberation, then it normally cuts off additional submissions and the like and comment.
Very well. With that, I would move that the board approve the issuance of the written decision as amended and order that a dog named Annabelle owned by Melissa Mitchell be designated as a dangerous dog. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Do we have any further discussion? I am seeing none, so we will be doing a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Carolyn Van Tyne, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And it is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And thank you, Blythe and Peter, for your help in crafting this decision. I know that there was a lot of revisions, a lot of drafts. Appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item this evening is to please consider approval of additional dates for Zealous Beer Company for pop-up beer and food events on Town Hill on Sundays through November 1st. Blythe, would you like to give us a little bit of background?
As some folks hopefully got a chance to go and to partake of the events that were approved at an earlier board meeting, there were 2 events so far. And so Jeff Petter is here from Zealous to discuss with the board his request for additional dates through November 1st. I would point out to you that we have talked with various staff and departments, and from their perspective, all of these have gone well, and we have not received any complaints about them. In fact, I hear that people have enjoyed them, so that's great. And so I would just tell the board, point out to the board that simply from the perspective of the calendar, if the weekend of October 17th is rainy, and the Garden Club who previously booked the Town Hill on Saturday, they have a rain date already approved of Sunday afternoon, so that would be an impediment, and that daylight savings starts on November 1st, so not sure that they could go quite as late in the day with no lights outside as 7 p.m. But that's a minor thing. So I will leave it there, and that's where we stand.
Thank you very much, Blythe. Jeff, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Did you want to give a little bit of feedback on your perception of the last couple events that were executed and what your vision is for the next couple?
Yes, I think they've been very well received. It's been fun to meet all the good people of Norfolk, many of which have shown up. And I think the community is really warm to the events. I think they see them as safe, and I think they're very grateful for the board of signing off on them. About any future events, I would like them to be similar to the events we've already had. I know there's been some mention of having other food vendors there. So when we initially requested these, the idea was to have some other food vendors. In the background, I have been trying to organize some. There was Cousin's Maine Lobster, for example, but they don't have any availability. And I know Kevin had mentioned today some local restaurants might be interested. And I'm supportive of that. They would just, they have to, I'm sure they know how to make food, but they just have to know how to run the event. So it's, well, not run the event, but be able to serve food on, disposable or recyclable materials, etc. But no, I have to say we've really enjoyed the votes, the events, and they've been very, very well attended, which I think speaks to the potential of having future events at the Town Hill. Generally speaking, I think there is a big demand for them. There has been no issues that I know of. I've met lots of police from the town of Norfolk who've come for friendly chats, and that's about it.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Greatly appreciated. And just to echo, the feedback that at least me as an individual has heard from other residents in town has been overwhelmingly positive. The only thing that I think that we heard as an opportunity was availability of restrooms in the area, but that has nothing to do with you. That is for us to figure out as we move forward. But everybody has said that, it's been safe, it's been engaging, it's been a great way to get the community together in a safe manner. So I really do appreciate you coming over and executing these events for us in the professional and safe manner that you have. So thank you very much for that.
restroom issues, there is the library right next door. Is that a possibility?
Yes, it is. We need to discuss about how that works with the limited availability of the library, operating hours, cleaning, all those kind of fun things. So it's a lot of complexity that we're currently discussing, but we hope to have it figured out in the near term, in the short future. With that, I will toss it to my fellow board members for any questions or comments, starting with Anita.
Kevin, I have also heard really positive things from the community about that event. So in terms of that, I think it's a nice opportunity for people to gather. My only question would be about the Board of Health and the new COVID cases. Were they connected in any way to this? And just to make sure that it's a safe opportunity for our the people of Norfolk.
So we don't receive any details about the cases or where they're, where they originated. We wouldn't be able to connect those dots for us. We still remain in a very low case count overall. So I think as long as that's the case, and we don't shift into the yellow zone or the red zone, I'm going to take a guess and say the Board of Health would be okay with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Cece?
I'm not sure. So I've driven by, it looks great. I've heard phenomenal things about it. I think it's cool. I'm really glad we're doing it, or you're doing it. One's a question, and then I'll comment right before the question, I guess, that I'm having a tough time hearing you. So apologies if I missed something for whatever reason. I turned it all the way up and I could barely hear you. And then I forgot to turn it down before Kevin spoke, and yikes, that was loud. So it's gotta be something, I don't know if it's your system or my system. I'm not sure what's going on, but nevertheless, I apologize if you give me an answer and I miss one more than three. I did note, although it wasn't necessarily a concern I shared, I know that there were people who were potentially concerned that with the pandemic and the impact that it's had on local restaurants, that sort of allowing for a potential competing interest would be, could have been problematic. Seemed to me sort of the idea that if you, what I'm going to mask for the expression, but if you have one lawyer, you've got, a few clients. If you have two lawyers, you've got thousands of clients. I don't know. There's some, like, it brings more people, gets people to be thinking in terms of the fact that maybe I'll go and have a beer and something to eat in downtown Norfolk. But that's just my opinion. It's not based on anything, because who am I? I just wondered if, and this may not be a question necessarily for you, maybe for the town, have we heard, other than from sort of the people, the citizenry, opining on the community page, et cetera, have we heard from any restaurateurs or people who operate in what could theoretically be deemed a competing interest, notwithstanding I'm not aware of the sweet spots intersecting, but just, people who sell food and beverage of the adult variety, have they complained? Like the people who would actually be impacted, have they complained or raised any concerns about the competing interest? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I have had the opportunity to speak with 3 restaurant owners in town who, on the complete other side of the spectrum of complaining, they've offered their support to say, hey, if they need somebody to help or bring ice or do whatever to help out, they said they're there to help. So they've been supportive of these efforts. And in addition to that, they've also expressed an interest in partnering with Jeff to be able to provide food, like he had mentioned, for future events.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because again, as I said, sort of what do I know, but just instinctually, I thought if you've got something sort of new, novel, neat, for a 1950s expression, that sort of gets people out, mindful of social distancing, et cetera, but then sort of gets them thinking about weekend, maybe a lighter alcoholic beverage with some interesting new food pairing, then maybe they're going to think in terms of going out to other places. It seemed like it would really work, but as I said, not my space at all. So I just wanted to double check. And so I'm really glad to hear that, because other than that, I think it's really cool. So that's it. That's my observation.
Thank you very much. So my only last comment, tying back to that, is, I have spoken to a couple of restaurant owners. I haven't spoken to all the restaurant owners in Norfolk about their interest in potentially partnering for these events. Later on in our agenda this evening, we'll talk about the potential of executing a restaurant roundtable for a different purpose. But Jeff, if we were to move forward with the approval of 4 events through November 1st, I would ask that we reserve the latter 3 for a potential partnership with our local restaurants. I know that Republic puts forth an incredible product, and I don't want this to be perceived as a dig on them in any way, shape, or form. I was a huge fan of the pork belly burnt ends. But I do want to give our local businesses the opportunity to be able to showcase their product as well in the same kind of forum. So if it's agreeable to you, I'd like the motion to read that the first event on October 11th, given the short timetable, would be executed with the partnership with Republic or whoever else you want to bring with you, but that we leave that window open for the next 3 thereafter, and we'll follow up soon to be able to connect the dots on those. Does that make sense?
That's okay with me. Yes. So you will provide contact details, etc., so I can communicate directly with them.
Absolutely.
And the question on October the 18th and the Garden Club rain day, is there a way of having language just to say that if they do need it? I mean, I think they have it till 3, so my question would be whether we want to operate it from, say, 3 to 6. We might do. I'm not sure. But it might get dark. It might, you don't have as long time period, and it's quite a lot of effort to set it all up. But so if they do need the rain day on the 18th, we probably wouldn't open. But if they don't, we would.
Right. And I don't know what the potential is for being able to execute another event on November 8th, given, New England. But Blythe, what's your read? Is this something that we should build into the motion now? Is it something that we could address at a meeting later in October?
So I'm like Cece, I'm really having trouble hearing Jeff. I think we can definitely take up November 8th on the October 20th agenda. I mean, you could approve it prospectively, or we can revisit this again, whichever way you prefer. I wasn't sure if you were asking if they could simultaneously hold something with the Garden Club. I just, like I said, I was having trouble hearing.
Sorry, I'll speak louder. I was just saying, could we provisionally say we would, if they do not need it, then we would hold the event. But if they do need it, then we would want a rain date ourselves.
Well, that's what I assumed, was that, the only reason you wouldn't hold it is if it rains on Saturday and they're rained out. Otherwise, it would be approved for your use on the 18th.
Okay.
We only have the hiccup of another event already scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah, Blythe, I think what Jeff is getting at is if there's a way for us to throw in a rain date for that 18th event, should the Garden Club need it, if he could have an event on, November 8th or something like that, provisionally.
It sounds okay, but I don't have the schedule in my head, so I don't know if anybody else has made any plans for that date. I'm gonna say no. So I think that would be okay.
Right.
So Jeff, we do have another select board meeting scheduled for the 20th of October. So by that point, we will have known if that was able to have been held or not, and we could take it up at that meeting just to ensure that we cover all bases.
Yeah, let's plan on that, because we might want the week after that instead of the 8th.
Gotcha.
Just to make sure it's pretty cold. The coldest event we ever had was I think it was on December the 15th 2 years ago, and it was freezing. And then we did the event the corresponding weekend the following year, and it was warm. So New England weather is very unpredictable.
That might be the understatement of the year.
Um,
All right. Go ahead, Blythe. Did you have something else?
No, sorry.
With that, I will open it up to anybody that is in attendance for any questions or comments related to the Zealous Beer Company beer garden events on Town Hill. If you'd like, please use the raise hand function located under the participants icon on the bottom of your window. I am not seeing any hands. If there is anybody who can't find the raise hand function, please wave furiously in front of your camera. We are seeing no furious waving. Jeff, you had something else you wanted to add?
I did, yeah. We had briefly discussed earlier about having a sort of holiday event of a larger scale in December or some time period like that. What are people's thoughts about that?
When you say a holiday event, you're talking about the Christmas holiday, obviously, right?
Yeah, towards that time period, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously not on Christmas Day, but it would be in December at some point. I'm probably on a Saturday, not a Sunday. It's just a thought. I mean, I think that people, I mean, in my opinion, coronavirus is probably not going to be gone for at least until spring, summer next year, where we can actually realistically have more normal lives. And I think people probably want to be able to get out and do something around that period. And they may be able to tolerate colder weather than they would typically be, because I think people are going to get pretty cooped up. And I think it's going to happen January and February too. I just think people's perception is going to change a little bit. I mean, unfortunately, I mean, we own a tap room in Medfield too, and I just don't see indoor dining or indoor events. There's still a lot of people who won't want to go indoors. They just won't.
Yeah, no, understood. And, given how well these have gone, I would be more than open to hearing about some creative ways to execute something like that as we get closer to that time. But I don't know if this is the correct forum to necessarily brainstorm through that at this point. I think, seeing a couple more of these events go through, partnering with a couple of local restaurants, seeing how that goes, and then collaborating from there about how we would present something like that would be something I'd more than be open to. I'll toss it to the other board members for their thoughts and opinions. Cece?
I can only hear one half of the conversation, so I'm just smiling and nodding at this point. I trust everybody who's got better audio than I do. I feel like we've gotten into the weeds. We're dealing with, I think it's great. Whatever you guys work out, it's okay. I can't hear it, so I'm sorry.
What Jeff had asked was if we would be open to planning a larger scale event later into December with more of a holiday theme associated to it. And
Oh, cool.
I was just identifying that, I think we'd be open to hearing about some creative
Well,
ways
then
to do that.
let me tell you, Jeff, I think that that's an outstanding idea. And I understand, so that explains your weather comment a little more clearly. But I think, right, to your point, yeah, we're in New England, but we're New Englanders. So typically we do outdoorsy stuff for most of the year, albeit we complain about it. So an opportunity, especially if there's still issues, but even if they're not, I think it's worthy of exploration. Be cool.
Anita, your thoughts?
Yes, I think that sounds awesome. I heard so many positive things. Again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but just make sure our Board of Health is on board in terms of the size of the gathering and the systems that are in place to increase the size.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. I do see one hand up. Donna, go right ahead if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address before you share. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Donna Jones, North Street. I attended this past Sunday at 5 p.m. and noticed an overflowing town trash barrel with recyclable, redeemable cans included in it. The town does have a separate redeemable can container, and that was full. Is there the opportunity to empty these through the event? Is it up to the town to do that? Do we gain from the redeemable cans? Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
So
Blythe,
I
would you
can
like to field that?
start.
Go right ahead.
The arrangements that we made is that Jeff is and the food vendor are responsible for removal of all trash, because if we needed to bring in public works, then we had a cost to bring them in on a minimum of overtime on a Sunday to pay them to do that. So perhaps Jeff maybe just need to make some adjustments with what we're planning for trash removal, so we're taking care of that.
Can I respond?
Go right ahead, Jeff, and speak as loudly as you can.
Okay. I accept the comment, and it's something I've noticed, and I think that what we should do is offer not just trash, but also recycling. So then we can separately take cans are the major issue, because I believe you're not allowed to recycle with oil and grease on it. So yes, we will offer recycling as a separate option.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the comment, Donna. Any other questions or comments?
I just have one other question. Sorry to keep talking, but so if none of the other town restaurants want to take the other dates, is it okay if Rib Republic comes back?
Should we not be able to find a local partner for a given date? I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to have Republic come back.
Okay.
Or Cousin's Made Lobster sounds fantastic too, just throwing that out there.
They have no dates. They have no dates available.
So Shark Tank things, man. All right, if we have no other comments or questions, I will move that the board vote to approve the use of Town Hill on Sundays beginning October 11th through November 1st to Zealous Beer Company, and further to issue one-day beer and wine licenses for each Sunday during this period, with the possible exception of October 18th. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion? I'm seeing none, so we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
TC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And it is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Jeff. We really do appreciate it and look forward to seeing you on Town Hill.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
You too. Our next item this evening is to please consider approval to transfer the common Vitro license for Roma Italiano pizza and roast beef. Blythe, go right ahead, please.
Yes, in your packet is the application, and I'm unfortunately I'm probably going to get the pronunciation of this name wrong. Bashar Wisa, perhaps, who is the new owner of this establishment, and so he is applying for transfer of the license. He'll also be the manager of the restaurant, and everything from our perspective in the packet is in order. The only thing you don't find in here, you might typically look for, is an F11. And the reason for that is that this is simply an owner change and an adjustment of hours. There is a site plan currently already on file for this business. So with that minor modification, we felt it wasn't necessary to ask that person to go through all of that. Seem more friendly to just point that out to you and suggest that we think that it's fine as it is. So I see a person on the call who might be here to represent them. I'm not completely sure.
Thank you, Blythe. Mr. Wissa, was there anything that you'd like to add?
No, she explained it all, and it's Tamer Wisa and Bashoy Wisa, both of us here. And I thank you guys. You've been great to us in the paperwork. Easy process. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wisa. That being said, I'll toss it to the rest of the board for any questions or comments, starting with Cece.
No questions and no comments.
Thank you, Anita, giving me the head shake, so that is a hard no. I don't have anything else to add, so with that, I'll open it up to anybody in attendance for any questions or comments. If you have a question or comment, just use that raise hand button. And we are seeing no questions or comments. So with that, I move that the board approve a transfer of the common vigil license for a Roma, Italiano pizza and roast beef to Besho Wissa and approve the expansion of hours to 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. Do we have any further discussion? I am seeing none, so we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Banshine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
That is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And best of luck, Mr. Wisa. All right, our next item this evening is to please consider approval of various select board policies and procedures. Go right ahead, Blythe.
So hearkening back to our September 1st meeting, we brought forth to the board 6 different policies. Some were updates and bringing them current that needed to be. A couple of them were new, and we discussed them with the board on that night and said that we would go forth and share them with all employees and share them with boards that would be affected by them, most particularly the code of conduct policy. And we've done that. They had until end of last week to get back comments or concerns so that you could have that advice before you took them up again. Scott, who's been spearheading this process, is with us, and speaking with him today, he indicated that there was a clarification request by the Council on Aging, but no problem, just wanted to make sure they understood it. And so we would suggest these are ready for the board's approval. So that's why they're on the agenda. And I'm not sure if, Scott, if you have any other thoughts or just here for questions. You're on mute.
I think that said, I'm just here for questions. I'm getting very good at lip reading. Thank you so much for joining, Scott. Really appreciate it. I don't have anything to add to this one. So at this point, I will toss it around to the rest of the board for any questions or comments, starting with
I don't know if you guys hear me or not.
No questions, Anita. Cece, any questions or comments?
No questions. I would just commend everybody who did the work. I know I was somewhat picky about things early on. I always see issues, and I'm stunned at the lack of certain things that we had before, that we didn't have things before. But thrilled that you guys took up this yeoman's work and came up with all of these.
Did we lose Cece or did I get dropped?
I think she's frozen on my screen. While we're waiting for her, I want to give a shout out to not only to Scott, but also to Judith, because she's the one we depend on in the office to make sure that grammatically, format-wise, we are perfect. And Scott and I try to keep up. We do our best. We often fall short. And we know that she's got us looking good and being grammatically correct at all times. So she scrubbed them after we finished them, and I think they're in good shape. So just want to say that.
Thank you very much, Blythe. So we'll give Cece another second to get back into the room. In the interim, I see that Mr. Wisa, you jump back on. We did just provide a unanimous vote in your favor. Was there something that we missed? Go right ahead.
Hello, I'm sorry. I did not hear the rest after you approved the license. I think it was a technical issue. I did not hear anything else. I just want to let you know that I didn't hear anything else if I did not respond to anything.
We just wished you the best of luck, sir. That was it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. right, so while we wait for Cece to make her way back into the room, can take a brief pause. Make sure her dog didn't
Want
jump
me to
outside
like
and
dance
shoot
or
her.
sing a song or something, Kevin?
Got to fill the dead air, Scott, any way we
Yeah.
can.
You tell
She's
who's the
having some-
HR director on this team, and it isn't me.
All right, I'm just going to talk to Cece about some technical issues she's running into. We'll be back in about a minute or two.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
We absolutely can. Welcome back. What a dramatic way to leave the meeting.
I had Wi-Fi and everything, and it was just the little spinning wheel of doom. So, so I had nothing more. I was just basically commending everybody on all the hard work that they did, so that people have a place to go to refer for questions and to understand how to interact with each other if there's a question or a problem. Is it going to cover every instance? Of course not. We're human, but it is a really great first step, and they are to be commended for that. That was it, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you very much, Cece. At this point, I'll open it up to anybody in the audience for any questions or comments related to the current agenda item. Please use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. I am seeing no hands. So with that, I would move that the board vote to approve the following policies: the anti-discrimination and anti-harassment, including sexual harassment policy, code of conduct policy for town boards and committees, employee safety policy, equal employment opportunity policy, fraud and theft prevention policy, and video monitoring policy. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion? I am seeing none, so we will be taking a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
That is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And especially thank you to Blythe, Scott, and Judith for all of your work on putting these together.
Thank you
so
very much. I appreciate your support.
Our next item this evening is to please consider making appointments to various town boards and committees. Blythe, feel free to take us through anything that you'd like in the background.
Yep, so we have 3 different committees to take up tonight. One is the Cultural Council, with someone who'd like to join that committee. That's an important one because they need to have a minimum of 5 people on the committee, and right now they are at 4, so this is great timing. We have an interested party for the Council on Aging, and Dawn Cohen. I think I see her on the call in case you want to chat with her. And so she wants to be appointed, and the board, the COA would love to have her. But the one that's just bears a little bit more explanation, and that is the Historical Commission. So it's been, I think, I'll just say unclear in the past about who appoints the alternates to the Historical Commission, first step. And second, that alternates have a certain role, things that they can do and things that they can't. And so there's 4 motions in your packet, which is really to just kind of set them all on the correct course. State law leaves with the select board the responsibility to appoint a historical commission of up to 7 members. And they can also have alternate members, but those people also need to be appointed by the select board, and in the past they have not. Secondly, those alternate members can step up and serve, you know, at a meeting or an issue when someone else has to step out or can't go, but that's the only authority that they have. And in the past, 2 of the alternates have been the kind of delegates to other boards, the CPC and the Design Review Board. So Betsy Pine and I have pulled this all apart and put it all back together for you. And really, it's a little bit of shifting around and then just clarification. So 2 members who were regular members are agreeing to step aside to be alternate members. And one of those alternates would move up to a full member, as well as a new person, Mr. Sam Ziegler, to be a full member. And then just to keep everything on the up and up, we also scripted a motion for you to formally appoint the alternate members, who the other members who would be remaining. So I hope that wasn't too confusing, but like I said, it's an unbundling, putting back together and making sure that the proper authority is approving these appointments.
Thank you very much, Blythe. Ms. Cohen, since you took the time to endure our meeting with us this evening, is there anything that you'd like to share related to your interest in the Council on Aging?
Sure. My husband and I are 30-year residents of Norfolk, and within the next few years, we'll be able to benefit from the programs at the senior center. So I thought now would be a great time to get involved. I have the time and I have the desire. So I would like to go ahead and do that.
Well, we are wholly appreciative of your willingness to be able to dedicate that time to the betterment of the town. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cece, any questions for Ms. Cohen?
No, none at all. Hello, but no.
Hello.
It's just
Anita?
it's weird on Zoom. Be like, hi. But
Yeah.
I have no questions.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you for your willingness to participate in the town.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I will open it up to the board for any questions or comments related to the full list of appointments. Cece, anything from your end?
Again, no.
No. Anita, anything from your end? Nope.
No.
All right. Well, in that case, well, let me get ready to do this one. This is a longer one too. I move that the board approve the following appointments. Louisa DiCarmango to the Cultural Council for a 3-year term expiring on June 30th, 2023. Dawn Cohen to the Council on Aging for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2022. Michelle Mayhew from alternate member to full member of the Historical Commission for a 1-year term ending on June 30th, 2021. Sam Ziegler to the Historical Commission as a full member for a 2-year term ending on June 30th, 2022. Gail Sullivan and Marcia Johnston from full members of the Historical Commission to alternate members, and Thelma Ravinsky, Donna Jones, and Kathy Lang continuing as Historical Commission alternate members. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion? I am seeing none, so we'll be doing a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
It is a unanimous vote. Thank you once again to everybody who contributes and volunteers to the betterment of our town. It's truly appreciated. Our next item this evening is to please discuss a draft of the warrant for the November 17th, 2020 special town meeting. Blythe, what do we have for special town meeting so far?
We have a fairly short warrant. I probably just jinxed myself by saying that. I realize that now. But it is all of 8 articles currently, and the warrant did close in mid-September. So I'll just take you through them at the 30,000 foot level. The town typically includes articles that it might choose to have on the warrant, but maybe not take action on. And we've removed some of those just in the interest of, we're still in the pandemic. We don't need to keep people, in a location together longer than necessary to do the town's business. So let's be a little more focused in that. And so that's why we have 8. The first article is budget transfers. We will be coming back to you with some transfers for town meeting. And I would stress that our budget situation, as I think we've talked about at a previous meeting, is better than what we had planned in the spring, because there's additional revenue coming in from the state that we weren't confident about in the spring. And we plan to stay within that and the budget that was passed. We might move some things around, but we think it's important not to use any free cash at this point to prepare for winter and snow, to prepare for potential costs at the end of the year and other things, and to be keeping our eye on FY22. And not sure what that will bring us or not, and want to be in as good financial situation as possible. So those will be coming, but we'll discuss those in detail at the next meeting. We have left Article 2 on, which is unpaid bills, only because if we don't expect any, we don't have any right now, but if something wings its way in between now and November 17th, then we have the ability to deal with it if it's on the warrant. Otherwise, we plan to pass over it. Article 3 is, as you recall from the spring, the board voted unanimously that if monies came back to the town, then we would restore funding in some areas. And so this article is specifically about the Norfolk schools that they shared with us in the reductions. And so this article would apportion back to them their share of the revenue that we were going to be receiving that we hadn't committed to. And that's about $85,000. So that's why that is particular and is written in the way that it is. We will have capital to talk about, and there are 2 articles for that. One is capital by borrowing, and one is capital with cash. We will get into those details also more at the next meeting, and I'll be just starting to discuss these with the advisory committee tomorrow night. But very briefly, from borrowing, we're suggesting that 2 public works trucks and some continued road work be our priority for those funds. And we're still working on the list of cash capital, but it's going to be things that we think are most necessary: continued replacement of some vehicles, some repairs to some buildings, those sorts of things. So we'll talk about those more later. Article 6 is to hear reports of committees. I believe that the B1 committee had already reached out to the moderator and wanting to make a short report. So that's what that's about. Article 7 is very long, but the crux of this article is, as you recall from the spring, the state has taken over at the finish line the special legislation for us to be able to acquire from the state 43 acres of land adjacent to Pond Street, which will enable the town to further build out that recreation complex in the future. So this is all the legalese that comes with such an article, to use community preservation funds, so funds that we already have, to acquire this land. I fully expect the dollar amount to come down from what's in this article, but as you know, we generally write articles more broadly. And then when we get to the motion, we are very specific as to how much or what source. So please don't be concerned about the approval of $100,000. I expect it will be far less than that. But there were some issues that we've been working out in the last couple of weeks, and still a few nits and gnats to take care of. So that's why we're scripting a little lot higher. And then, as you heard earlier this evening, the last article currently is the acceptance of Silver Fox Road. When I said that we have 8 articles right now, if you've been following Facebook, you know that there is a possible citizens petition about a change to animal regulations. I met with the petitioner on yesterday, and I'm not completely. We had a great conversation about how the process works and what the steps are, but I'm not sure at this point whether they will turn in a petition or not. But she knows the deadline and the process, so that one we'll have to wait for. But that is, at this point, that's the only other article that I'm aware of. So that's my overview.
Thank you very much, Blythe. I have no questions or comments from my end, so I will toss it to the rest of the board. A head shake from Anita means we'll go to Cece. And another head shake means that we do not have any questions or comments at this time. Thank you for the extremely detailed and concise summary. It answered all of our questions before you could even ask them.
The one that you didn't ask, I thought you might, is I did late today try to check in with the moderator about location. That's the one thing that we haven't settled on yet. And so he asked me what the status is of the warrant. I'll share the draft with him tomorrow. My hunch is that he will head towards perhaps a room in the middle school or maybe at Freeman Kennedy if it stays what I would kind of describe as a housekeeping town meeting. If it became more other articles and might generate a larger crowd, we do still have the middle school and high school both on reserve. So we could consider that if we need to. So we'll work that out in the next 2 weeks and get his direction on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Blythe. If we don't have any other questions or comments related to this agenda item, I will toss it to the audience for any questions or comments they might have. If anybody would like to pose a question or comment related to the fall town meeting warrant, please use the raise hand function at this time. I'm seeing no hands, and we will be moving on to our next agenda item, which is please discuss the proposed 5-year capital improvement program. Take it away, Blythe.
So I will apologize for 135 pages in your packet. You're like, oh my goodness, what's this doorstop? Electronic doorstop. But as we promised you last year when we put together the first go pass at a capital budget, that we would build it out from simply a spreadsheet with a list of projects and some dollars to what would be a much more thorough planning document so that the board, the town, the advisory committee, our residents can at some point in the near future start to talk about how its priorities and how we approach some of these things, what order we do major capital, building projects in, how we do this in a way that residents find palatable in terms of their tax rate and how it affects their services, all those things. So I don't at all, it's not expect anyone to have read this all and committed it to memory. But what I do want to point out is just give you an overview. So last year when we did that exercise, we came up with, I don't recall how many projects or pieces of equipment, but today it's 91 different items and is just over $58 million. It's an increase of almost about $8 million more than last year. But those really only account for 3 things. One is that we're just going to obtain the land on Pond Street. And so the Recreation Commission's vision is that that project to be what they would like it to be could be a $10 million project. And last year it was envisioned as a $6 million project. That's something to definitely talk about in the future. We are identifying 20 years to replace water pipe, a certain type of water pipe in the ground. That would come from the Water Enterprise Fund, but that's $3.5 million. It was far less last year. And then, as you know, we have a new fire chief, and he takes a different approach to our equipment, fire department. If you looked at last year's plan, our ladder truck, which is 24 years old and beyond its typical useful life, he had proposed a refurbishment of it for $350,000. And Chief Kinney believes that it's not necessarily a good investment to put that kind of money into a truck of that age. And the town would be better served with a much more versatile vehicle called a Quint. Unfortunately, new those come at a price tag of $1.3 million or almost about $1 million more. So And the reason I developed all this, as I said, is to start the conversation. I want to make very clear that I don't put this out there as the town must do all these things, or they must do them in each of these years at this price point. It's somewhat also a philosophical conversation. There's been some debate in Public Works about whether we continue to buy these really large trucks that cost over $200,000, or do we transition to smaller trucks that cost less, can be driven by more people, and that's definitely something we're working on, because we don't need 7. We have 7 of them. We don't need 7 of the size we do. Should we rent a truck? You know, is that a good plan as a way to get through not spending large amounts of money, but is that, you know, at the end of the day, when you turn it back in April, you have nothing and you've spent X amount of dollars. So those are the kind of things that staff works on and thinks about to try to help us plan. And so for FY21, there are 29 projects or items in here. Our thought is, depending on the budget for this town meeting and perhaps in the spring, we can address some part of or all of 20 of them. Because some of them are small, like a new circulator pump for HOD school. That's important. You need heat, need to be circulated in the winters. We can't let that just fail on us. So we might fund all of that cost, but if we really think we need to spend $1 million on roads and we're only going to be able to spend 500, then we're not fully, you know, meeting that goal. And as I said earlier, you know, the tax rate, what people pay to live in town is really important. And so we've got to find a way that keeps us providing the operations that we need to provide with equipment on track. But we also have to make hard choices about the things that we might want to do, the timing, and say, you know what, we're going to really focus on one thing, and we might let something else, you know, lag a little bit, because we really don't have any major debt drop off in our debt load until FY24-5, when the library and some of the KP debt comes off. And so in a perfect world, you would infill what's going off with something that comes on, so you keep it at least level, if not going down. But how does that line up with the need to expand Freeman Kennedy School, or, you know, be able to have the fire station be what it needs to be? And where does a expanded recreation complex fit in all that? So, like I said, I don't want to go into all the details tonight because there's an awful lot here, but I would just hope that we could start to talk about it and then think about how we might dig into it more later. A suggestion is that perhaps over a series of meetings, we can have departments come and talk to you about each of these things. So you can get into them a little bit more. One thing we did do this year is the reason it's so long is there's a page for every project. And the goal is that it's a snapshot. It's 2 paragraphs that tells you a little bit more about it. Not maybe everything everyone would want to know, but at least helps you understand why it's important and why it's in there, and what's going on. So I will leave it at that so we don't go on too long, but I would love any questions or feedback that you have.
Well, I know from my perspective, I'm sure that once the DPW guys find out that Chief Kinney is proposing a $1.3 million Quint ladder truck, it might take some of the sting off of their $200,000 dump truck. So let's make sure that we keep that all relative. But outside of that, I really like your approach here. I like that you broke out each individual project and gave a snapshot of it. I think it's going to be very relatable for people to see and to understand the scope of what's required. I like that we're getting it all at once right now so that we can kind of consume bits and pieces of it as we go. And then if we have questions, we can address them directly with the department heads as they come in. This is a required first step. We're going to have to plan this stuff out. And as much as it might not be very appealing to take on some of these additional costs, this is at least the catalyst that we need to be able to start that conversation. So thank you for dedicating the massive amount of time it took to put all this together. I know it's been a long-standing project, and we're excited to have it in front of us. So thank you. I'll toss it to the rest of the board for any surface questions or comments, starting with Cece.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a lot to unpack. I like how it is. This is what I thinks that we're going to be potentially having to field in the next 5 years. I think I'm going to have some questions after I have an opportunity to digest it. At first blush, though, I do think it's incredibly useful to know now the lay of the land from the standpoint that frequently in the past I've sort of observed it's sort of ad hoc. Now we need to deal with this, now we need to deal with that. And not really, and certainly we could think about what we knew was in the pipeline, but more nebulous than concrete in terms of potential impact financially. And you're right. I appreciate that everybody has their, these are the items that we need. And I see that, and I'll just use the fire apparatus just as an example. New something like this costs X. But if there's other things that are going to hit at the same time as a new fire apparatus, does that, what other things can we in the intervening time period come up with as solutions? Because I am mindful of the fact that, and we can't overstate it, we don't have a lot of commercial. We are a small town and everybody has needs. Everybody thinks that their needs are incredibly important, and to them they are, and they probably all are. So I look forward to kind of reading it more and marking it up, and then coming back and saying, hey, can we put this back on? I wanted to talk about this or that, or just asking more questions. So observationally, again, another kudos, another job well done. And, but I'm certainly not going to tonight commit to, talking about what is more important. Because I don't have enough information yet, but this is the kind of thing that I think gives us the information. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Cece. Anita?
I was just nervous that tonight's meeting was going to go till 1 a.m. So we seem to do that fairly frequently. So I just, to piggyback on what everybody else is saying, it is useful to see this like this because it can help us make short and long-term decisions. And so it's useful to have the information all in one place, and it's useful as we begin to wrestle with what are the ways we want to solve these problems, right? Because really it's a list of problems that we have in the town and possible solutions for them. And so thank you for doing the work to put that together, and thank you for not wanting us to do it all tonight.
Absolutely not. And I really want to make sure that I thank all the staff, and especially Todd Lindmark, who worked on this with me tirelessly. And we need to do more work to think about strategies of how we might attack some of these things. But it's always been really important to me that towns aren't surprised by the things, over the years we've bought and invested in all these things. And for one reason or another, they're important to us. And I just want to make sure that we start that conversation. We figure out how we go and what things we don't do or put off or move to the front. That's what I'm looking forward to when we're ready to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Blythe. I'll open it up to anybody in attendance this evening. Any questions or comments related to the first blush at our capital improvement plan? Please use the raise hand function located under the participants icon on the bottom of your window. We are not seeing any hands at this time, and we'll be moving on to our next item. Since Select Person Mecklenburg has jinxed us into likely having 1 a.m. meeting now.
I hadn't even thought of that. I'm hopping on my bicycle and driving over. Not tonight.
Our next item this evening is to discuss hosting a local restaurant roundtable discussion to review operational limitations heading into the fall and winter and ways for the town to partner with these businesses and support them. I was the one that requested this item be added, so I will be happy to provide a little bit of background. Whenever you contribute to boards of this nature, you're able to leverage your professional experience as well as your personal experience. We have expertise in the legal department, we have educational expertise, and then you have me, food and beverage. So there isn't really many opportunities to leverage that expertise unless it comes to dealing with our local restaurants. So I've had some great conversations with some of our restaurants in the area, in town and out, about some of the challenges that they've been running into over the course of the last few months related to COVID restrictions. And some of the feedback that I've heard is that there is inherent value to being able to get everybody together into one room to discuss some of those challenges and to see if there are creative ways for us to be able to better support them as they move forward. Now, we've taken steps such as doing on-site reviews with full groups and teams of people from town hall to provide guidance, to guiding people through specific regulations, to connecting the dots on communication lines to be able to help people. But I think that by hosting a roundtable discussion such as this that focuses on a specific segment of the industry, we may have the opportunity to not only leverage some collaborative ideas, but also get some good learnings as to things that we could do as a town to better support these individuals as they try to traverse the difficult nature of our environment right now. So the point of this discussion item was to gauge some feedback from the rest of the board as to if this is something that you would be interested in pursuing, and then high level discuss some of the parameters of how we would go about doing that. So just given that brief introduction, I will toss it to the rest of the board for any initial reaction and thoughts before we talk about anything in more detail. Starting with Anita.
Absolutely. So I think there's never it's always good to hear from our town, right? And putting local experts together in a room, we can all learn from it and we can all grow from it. And so I think that is a fabulous idea. And as we know, business is a weak spot for Norfolk. And so the ways that we can support our local businesses, this could be a beginning of community conversations. So I think it seems like a great idea.
Thank you, Anita. Cece?
I echo Anita. And this will be my third kudos for the night. It's like the trifecta of kudos. I don't usually shower people with praise. I like to limit it so that people, feel like it has value when I do dose it out, but I kid. But I think that this is such a great idea. And it's something that I never would have thought of. And I think it's a real thoughtful way to address what I think everyone knows probably is happening, and acknowledge how important local businesses, and in this instance, a particular local business, but it has an overarching message to the larger business community that we are committed to trying to find new ways of keeping everybody okay. So well done.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to discuss some of the specifics around how we would execute this. Some of the feedback I received is that people would be a little more open to discussing some of the challenges they're facing as a business outside of a public forum, without being live streamed on YouTube. I know that initially we had thought about having everybody into a select board meeting to discuss things, but as we talked about more and more people being interested in joining, I don't know if that would necessarily be the right forum for something like that. So then we had discussed potentially holding it external of a meeting on an off week, and potentially having the full board there or a single member representative, or whatever it might be. to be able to make it as easy for people to share as possible. I know that there would likely be a great amount of interest in the community to hear some of those deliberations and discussions, but I also want to be sensitive to some of the business owners' concerns related to, how comfortable they're sharing in a public forum and whatnot. So any feedback or opinion that you might have associated to the format or the execution would be greatly appreciated. Blythe, anything that you'd like to share?
I very much agree with your approach. I'm just trying to line that up with the law, which is if two of you are going to be there, it is a select board meeting, and our bylaws require them to be, at least taped, even if not live streamed. I mean, there's a subtle difference there, but that's just kind of a challenge. So, maybe if you're trying to have it be just a group of people, maybe it should be one member participating. So something to think about.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I addressed was that we would have to tape the discussion just because I think of the public interest and the benefit for the community to hear some of the concerns that are happening with these businesses. I think that the core concern from some of the participants was speaking in a large Zoom setting with a bunch of people on the call with them, or having it be on YouTube and checking out that currently viewing counter and adding to your anxiety about what you say next. So I think that recording it and making it available at a later time might be a great middle ground there to ensure that we're abiding by the access laws and that people are as comfortable as they can be sharing in that forum. But to that point, there's the question of if it would be something we would want to field with the full board, or if it's something that we would want a single member to field in the interest of reinforcing the casual nature of the conversation. I'm open to any way that we want to do it, but I would welcome any thoughts and opinions as to how that would be executed as well.
Well, I think everybody who views this, watches our things at home, knows what I'm going to say, which is that I am just thrilled to death if you, Kevin, take the lead on this one. I don't need to be involved, and it's kind of in your wheelhouse. But if you think that you would prefer to have more voices, or perhaps a voice that doesn't have any sort of knowledge in this area to sort of bounce, the common man idea off of, I'm happy to do that as well. Maybe you start with just you and see if that works, or if it really needs more, and then maybe in the interim we figure out how to do it in such a way that maybe by that point we can have a very, very, very large round table that's actually in town hall. I mean, I understand you got to deal with your open meeting law, but maybe there's ways to navigate that, they're in the room, but it's on Zoom type of thing. However, I don't know how that all works, but so that we aren't violating open meeting law, but there are more sort of people spitballing from outside the industry. So I'm delighted to help, and I'm delighted not to help. How about that?
And to that point too, I'm more than happy to field this initial roundtable as an individual and report back to the board about how we move forward, and if there's decision-making points or opportunities. And then we could reassess and see how these types of discussions could be monitored in the future. Anita, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to be there more as a listener rather than as a facilitator. Time is just the issue, right? Is finding the time to participate. So, but I think it sounds really fascinating. It's always interesting to hear people in a field different from your own who are passionate about it, and it's always a learning experience. So I think I would be happy to participate as long as we can figure out the time and have the time work.
Absolutely.
But like
And
Cece said, I'm thrilled to have you take point.
well, I appreciate your confidence in my ability to do that. Thank you. We will have to work out some scheduling alignment, as those who do work in the industry typically are fairly busy in the evenings between 7 and midnight. So I do know that it might be a bit of a challenge to be able to get that to align appropriately to encourage as much participation as possible. Okay, so I think that's a good amount of direction that we needed to come out of this discussion. I appreciate everybody's input, and I really do look forward to getting everybody into a room and hearing about some ways that we might be able to better support these businesses as we enter into a potentially very dark time with everybody having to come inside and not be able to be seated in the outdoors any longer. Thank you very much for that. So our next item this evening is to please discuss website posting of board correspondence. Typically, this item is left for the review and approval of any new correspondence that we receive that we felt of interest to the community as a whole to be posted onto the website. We do not have any for a vote or to be acted upon this evening, but I do believe that we have a discussion point to review some of the qualifiers that we put in place for which correspondence would be considered to be put up onto the website. We had a situation where the board received an email that was potentially sent in error. That was fairly critical in nature, but we don't believe that it was intended to be sent to the board. So I think that what we'd like to discuss tonight is if our qualifiers for correspondence include correspondence that were potentially sent in error and how we would address that moving forward. I'm not sure if anybody has any surface thoughts or opinions on the approach, but I'll open it up to the rest of the board at this time, starting with Cece.
So, so my thinking is interesting because there have been recently, to my mind, I can think of at least 2, maybe more, communications that have reached town hall, either to, whomever, who that as a result are now public record. So whether or not the person intended that to happen, it did. But at the same time, some of what's included in the communications that I'm thinking about is very pointed. We were sort of joking around, are we sure that it wasn't intended for our eyes? Or, is it a reply all? And it just kind of created this thought in my head. And I know, so I appreciate the fact that even though there's nothing on tonight, we're kind of fielding this issue that if we suspect, if we think it doesn't make any sense that we got that through anything but inadvertence, what obligation do we have to, notwithstanding what's in the communication, and this is outside sort of the realm of, in terms of attorneys, when people accidentally forward communications that include privileged information, there's a whole other group of laws that we apply. But if you're just a general citizen and you're writing something that is not private, right? Like it's not, here is the code to my ATM and my date of birth and my social security number, right? Because that's obviously maybe something else that we'll have to deal with. But if you just basically said something that touches on town hall, and which is probably how it ends up in the reply all in the first place, right? Like if it has nothing to do with anything that touches on town hall, it's unlikely that we would get the accidental email. But assuming for a second, because I understand that it could be that they were intended for our eyes, but assuming for a second that we think it's greater than 90% chance that it was an accidental forward, but it touches on town hall, it touches on things that matter to the community. Do we reach out to that person and indicate, or people, and indicate, hey, you just sent this communication that while it doesn't contain anything that is sensitive or private, I don't know, we'll just use as, I'm just spitballing, just an example, doesn't necessarily show you in the greatest light or show someone else in the greatest light, like maybe isn't something that you would want, which is different from when people deliberately send things to us that don't show them in the best light, right? Like, so just to take a step back, if somebody sends something that most people wouldn't send, and it's clearly directed, you know, dear Cece, right? So we know it's coming to me or whomever. I'm just using me as an example. Then you don't. We've thrown it up there. Everybody knows it's going up on the site. If somebody sends something that does not necessarily cover them in glory, but we're pretty sure they didn't intend to send it, but we think that the townspeople might be interested in it, do we do nothing? And do we let them know, hey, was this intended for our eyes? Because we have it and it is now public record. So if anybody wanted to do a particular search on whatever the subject is, the particular missive, it will come up and that it will be, you know, go into other people's hands and leave it at that? Or do we say, hey, thanks, it's going on the website? Now, I'll admit that my knee jerk is that it comes in, it goes up. But to be fair, some folks aren't as facile with technology as others. And candidly, even people who are have made the occasional gaffe and hit reply all when they meant to forward or just reply to one. Is that fair? And I tend to think it's not fair. But I also tend to think just saying, oh, wow, that's pretty silly what that person probably did, and moving on. I kind of like the idea of reaching out and saying, hey, I don't know if you meant to send this. In any event, we have it and it's a public record. So, you know, have a nice day. I don't know. I don't know what to do, but I certainly don't think, as much as, you know, my instant reaction earlier was to say, no, I really think that should go up. The more I think about it, the more I think that if it wasn't intended for our eyes and it's just through a lack of technological savvy or laziness, I am guilty of that. Like, oh, I know I should just retype these, but I'm just going to let autofill do the work for me. And which I don't do anymore, but then I tell my associates, nobody's allowed to do autofill because you're going to hit the A and you're going to think it's that person. And then, oh, so, or is it, so what do we do? So that was why I thought, you know, even since we didn't have anything this week, but we had a few sort of most likely oopsie doopsies, sort of field the question. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And it definitely wasn't something that we took into consideration when we first outlined what the qualifiers would be for potential correspondence to be shared onto the website. Anita, any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I guess my, in terms of this conversation, I think my gut feeling is if we feel like it was an accident, that it does merit reaching out. I certainly wouldn't extend that courtesy repeatedly. So if this person accidentally did it again, I think that a repeated request doesn't seem in order. And so I think in this situation that we're talking about, it is a reasonable thing to say, hey, did you mean to send this to us? Because, you know, just so you know, this is our policy and it does go. And if you did mean it, we'll go ahead and put it up. But if you didn't mean it this one time, we will not post it. I think that seems like a reasonable response.
Oh, that's a great point, Anita, because I could
That's
easily see, I could easily see some creative folks out there highlighting that, oops, I sent a super critical message about Kevin, my bad, didn't mean to do that, don't post it, and then continue to do that down the road. So I think being able to call out and say, hey, look, we got this, likely a mistake, so we're not going to consider it for putting up. But please know that if we do see a mistake like this come across again, this is the one freebie that you get.
Yeah, and I think, I guess in my mind too, there's a difference between critical, like I think the board is strong enough that any of us can take criticism, right? None of us are perfect or pretend to be perfect, but there's a difference between criticism and real, okay. There's a difference.
I pretend to be, I'm not actually perfect, but I pretend to be perfect.
But I think that there's a difference between criticism and uncharitable comments. And so I think in the case, if we think it was an accident, reaching out and verifying that it was an accident is in order, but it's not a habit. Like we always have at my house, we say, you know, mistakes make you smarter, which is great, but make new mistakes.
A great point. Yeah. And yeah, you're absolutely right too. I mean, criticism is always welcomed when done in a respectful and appropriate manner. And I think that, you know, what we've been focusing up until this point has been those that cross that threshold into not being respectful or appropriate. Very good. All right. So I think that we have some direction. I do see a hand up, so we'll open it up to the audience. Sue, go right ahead.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I just, are we kind of going to clear the slate for everybody and give everybody one freebie? Or are we going to, you know, maybe for some of the folks that tend to do this pretty regularly against particular people, just for my own information, I just want to know what your plan is. I think what you've said is a great idea, but you know, we're going to say, okay, as of November 1st, everybody gets one bye week, right? You can send that email that is inappropriate, and then after that, they're going to be published. Because we've been working on this for a really long time.
Yeah, and I will say that, you know, we haven't really gotten the influx of correspondence that we would deem as being inappropriate over the course of the last 4 or 5 months. So that's why we haven't seen too many other entries be proposed for the posting of correspondence. But in this specific instance, we're talking about a very specific situation where the appearance of the correspondence would give us the idea that it was not intended to be sent to us. It was done by mistake. It was done by fat fingered. It was done by some other kind of, you know, as Cece had put it, lack of tech savvy. So I think that we're talking about a very specific instance here. And in most of the correspondence that I think you're referring to, Sue, are pretty pointed and direct and don't really fall into that category. So no, to answer your question, there isn't a clean slate being issued for all. There is not a freebie for any correspondence that you send into the board. This is only related to those that give us the perception that it was done in error.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very welcome. Blythe, any thoughts, comments, or concerns? No? All right. Well, with that, we will move on to our next item on our agenda, noted as the town administrator updates. Go right ahead, Blythe.
Just a couple of updates. We expect to move ahead with start construction on Holbrook Street well next week. That's good news. Moving right along. I saw a posting on Facebook by our DPW staff that they're out there real late today finishing up paving, but paving should be done for this season with that work on Medway Street and Lake Street today. And I wanted to mention earlier, we didn't really cover it in COVID updates, but the library continues to have expanded services. They're actually doing some limited passport services, passport renewals, applications. They're lending items more. They're not just books, but other on the library things. And while they're not open to the 50% level, they people don't need to make appointments anymore. They're able to come in and browse, and being able to have in the people who want to be there. So slowly getting better, and we're excited about that. I'm hoping you brought your calendars with you tonight, because we do need to kind of do a little housekeeping, and that is I think I had asked you all whether you could start earlier on the 20th, the next meeting than 7 o'clock for a joint meeting with the planning board to go into executive session to discuss strategy for some the Fern Ridge litigation. I had a mediation prep meeting today on that, and we're wanting to discuss that mediation document with both boards before we actually start that mediation. So question is, can you start perhaps as early as 6:15 to do that with them that night?
Can you repeat the date again, Blythe?
Our next meeting on Tuesday, October 20th.
I can do 6. Although I put
Well,
8
of
down.
course, we'll try to make it closer to 7, but we also want to make sure you have time to have a appropriate.
Right. Well, so I'll just book out from 6 on, and then if it moves closer to, I'll be covered. It'll be a pleasant surprise.
Okay,
That works for me.
thank you. We do
I have 6
that,
o'clock
and then
booked out as well.
wanting to discuss with them. So you may recall that when we did the road acceptances last town meeting, we were also going to do Meeting House Road and Liberty Lane, and they're not on the warrant this year. They didn't get done. So why aren't they? The reason that they're not is because there's different ways that towns can accept roads. And so we thought it was really, Rich McCarthy and I think it's really important for both boards, while you're already going to be together, to spend a little time discussing the difference and telling us as staff whether you want to keep doing it the way we've always done it, which is to take acceptance of the road itself and the land underneath, or take an easement over the road and not own the land underneath. That's the very basic difference. But there's more to it than that. And so they'll stay on with us to talk about that item as well. And Kevin, if you're okay with it, maybe we'll just jumble up our agenda a little bit so we can continue with them and then let them head off to something, whatever else they're going to do that night.
That makes sense.
Discussion first. The second housekeeping date question is, so our next meeting after that would be November 3rd. Kind of a big date, presidential election, a whole bunch of other offices up for election, and we don't generally meet on that night. So my suggestion, if it's your schedules, is to meet the night before on the 2nd. We could kick it to the 10th. However, we have had some folks a little frustrated when planning board and select board end up on the same night in different Zoom rooms. So that would be an impediment. And for anyone who's thinking about, Veterans Day the next day, it's a holiday the day after. Not really my concern, but I just wanted to point that out. So I don't know what's best for everybody, but November's tricky because we've got the election followed by our next regular meeting is town meeting. So it's hard to do business, and I know that we're going to have some.
I mean, from my perspective, I would much rather prefer to meet on the 2nd as opposed to the potential conflict with the planning board. But that's just me.
I would prefer the 2nd as well.
2nd is fine.
Okay, great. I'll work that out with NCTV and go from there. Thank you. So those were all my things I wanted to cover.
Thank you, Blythe. Anybody have any questions or comments related to Blythe's updates? Cece, Anita, seeing some head shakes. Very good. Thanks, Blythe. Our next item this evening is to approve some warrants. Oh, we have our summary motion. Glorious. I would move that the board approve 6 warrants for the period September 11, 2020 through September 29, 2020 as printed on the agenda for this meeting. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Cece Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And our last item this evening is to please consider the approval of minutes I will toss it over to our clerk.
I move that the board approve, oops, I'm sorry. I move that the board vote to approve the minutes of July 27th and September 15th, 2020 regular meetings.
Second.
Hearing a second, do we have any further discussion? We're hearing none, so we'll do one more roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
CC Van Tine, aye.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
And that is unanimous as well. Thank you so much. Well, that is the conclusion of our agenda this evening. Blythe, anything else you'd like to add in?
Yeah, one more thing I forgot. So Zoom meetings are really awesome in one way, but really frustrating in other, because we can't corral you at the end of the meeting for a signature on something. And so I know it's really been tough for, trying to come in when your life is crazy, and flying in, flying out, or, porch conversations are great, but they're not always possible either. So want to throw out some ideas. And the ideas that we have are a couple. Number one, we could deliver things to you, if that's the easiest way, by a staff member or a police officer, whatever is possible, and just drop it to you so you could drop it back to us at your convenience is an option. The other option would be to, if you don't have a fob to get in town hall, we could issue you one so that you could run in at your convenience to the mailroom, sign what's left for you, and take off. I don't need an answer right now. I'm just trying to find an easier way for all of you, because you're all busy, and it's just a challenge. So I'm just going to put that out there, and just let me know. Send me a text or an email about what you'd prefer, and we'll make that happen.
Thanks, Blythe.
Yep.
So I think that's it for this evening. We do have an update related to the B1 committee. We met with the planning board last night, but since it's not on the agenda, I'll save that for our next meeting to provide an update. I don't think that there's anything else to note before our next meeting, which Blythe has already identified, will be on October 20th, potentially starting with a executive session starting at 6 p.m. and then the open meeting opening up, hopefully, fingers crossed, by 7 p.m. With that, I'll toss it around the table one more time for anybody who has anything else to add, starting with Cece.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you. Anita?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you very much. And Blythe, once more. Nothing to add. Very good. So with that, I would move to adjourn this meeting of the Norfolk Select Board.
Second.
Hearing a second, any further discussion? Thankfully, there is none. We'll do one more roll call vote. Kevin Calcutt, aye.
Damn it, I went in the wrong order. CC Van Tine, aye. I unmuted it, and I'm like, I'm muted, and then I muted it and talked, and then it was yelling at me. CC Van Tine, aye. All right.
Anita Mecklenburg, aye.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everybody.